When you go into the operating room for a major procedure, you don't care about political correctness. You don't care about how woke the staff are. You want the best.
The power of our democracy.
So has wokeism then become the grand narrative? Has it become what it's supposed to be against?
And it's not just postmodernism and Marxism. I see pieces from the safetyist movement, safetyism. Where did that come from? Well, I can tell you because I was part of that movement. It's a self-esteem movement of the 1980s. All over again. Well, not the whole self-esteem movement, a section of the self-esteem movement. And so on it goes. Martin Luther King would not recognize wokeism, but they borrowed from, in part from King. But it's an evolving structure. And I believe that there were academics in the 90s and the early part of this millennium that carefully mapped out things, but I think it's not beyond that. When you take a look at the direction it's gone, it's out of control.
I agree. Just as you talked about the media moving in a more of an advocacy type of model. And by the way, I'm going to flesh out what you just said about postmodernists in case our viewers don't know everything we're talking about here. Postmodernism, I'm going to simplify it because I'm not a scholar of postmodernism, but it is a philosophical movement, a language movement and whatnot. You have Jacques Derrida and Michel Foucault, who are the superstars of this movement. Look, a lot of what's happened is the idea that there's no one genuine grand narrative, no overarching narrative to which others have to answer to. And it was reactionary towards science. If you want to know a little bit about the history of what was going on, you had the turn of the 20th century where science is just becoming incredible in terms of discovery, invention, technology, you name it. Look at Einstein's 2 papers in 1905. Look at, air travel. Look at everything just kind of marching along. And some of my colleagues in academia really believe that what was happening is that philosophy and English literature theory and a lot of these other humanities were falling out of favor as being heavyweights as academics. And so the scientists were just coming along and making philosophy a bit of a handmaiden. And to combat that, you had this kind of reactionary movement in academia where they tried to undercut science and say, well, there's no such thing as a grand narrative. There are just narratives, which is, I think, false. I think science does describe cause and effect relationships in the natural world better than any other fields that are offered. If there's something better than what the various sciences can say about these cause and effect relationships, I'm personally open. I'm welcoming of that. But you can't just critique, right? You can't just say, oh, science isn't all it's cracked up to be. Really? So if no narrative has any grander view of, in this case, cause and effect relationships, the next time you have chest pain, call your gardener. It's just one narrative, cardiology, pruning. These are just narratives. One isn't more superior to the other in any way, but clearly, implicitly, society does recognize that there is a greater grand narrative that is science, essentially.
Well, the sad thing, though, is that there are some people who do not accept what they call Western medicine and will use other means, which they view as alternatives, which is really unproven therapies, and people are dying as a result. Children are dying as a result because they're not getting the proper medical care when they need it, even though the care is there. We have the facilities.
Yeah, I know. It's we just the whole pandemic and what we've experienced in terms of anti-science, coming from both the left and the right in some cases.
It's coming from the right and the left. In a sense, we can talk about whether the wokeism is really left, because it seems to have bended. But we'll get into that in a moment. But the point that I'd like to make is this: that in terms of the Enlightenment technology and the Enlightenment view, that has traditionally been attacked by the religious right. It's still being attacked by by fundamentalists, not just in Christianity, in Islam, and other religions as well. And our bastion in that has been the universities. The universities have been the ones that we've looked at, and by we, I'm talking about humanists in general. We've been looking to academia as our bulwark, as our defense, to make our arguments more clear. We've lost that bulwark. The academia, to a large extent, has been taken over. I'll give you an example. The lead author for that article in the Globe and Mail that I talked about, she had a position with the funded by the federal government, working on curriculum for kids. And then after the Globe and Mail article, she got an assistant professorship at the University of Alberta. Now, that means that, to me, that a person's research record is not as important in academia, at least in many universities, as is their political alignment.
Yeah. There's a prof at McGill, and he applied 2 years in a row. He's a major researcher. I forget what field, biochemistry. And he was turned down both times because his students that he wanted to hire wasn't diverse enough. And he said, I'm hiring on merit. And they said, no, you got to mix up your student races and make them more diverse. He was turned down. And I think it might be cancer research. Like, we're not talking about, various forms of, say, esoteric poetry. We're talking about the hard sciences where you need the very best people. When you go into the operating room for a major procedure, you don't care about political correctness. You don't care about how woke the staff are. You want the best. And we have lost our way in terms of hiring based on merit. And one of the things I really liked about symphony orchestras now is when they have tryouts, there's a screen and you don't know if it's male or female. You're just listening to them play, because that's when when the shit hits the fan, when things are rough, you want your superstars front and center. You don't want to hire on irrelevant political agendas. You want the best. And when I go into an operating room, I want the best. And when I want people figuring out how the natural world functions, we want the best people. And so it's unfortunate, that we saw this. I saw it in the humanities, then I saw it in the social sciences, and now it's in the natural sciences. And so what has happened is this insidious, horrible effect has crept into departments, and it's basically ideologically castrated any male who wants to speak up about, hey, should we be doing it? As soon as anybody mentions anything, they are seen as the problem. And this is what happens to certain movements, is that people are trying to always outdo each other in these movements. Well, you think that's woke? Watch this. You think that's woke? Watch this. And they keep topping each other.